Well, hello, hello. Hey, everybody. Good to be with you again. Someone asked me recently, what were the three things that really helped you to heal your burnout? And so I've been thinking back to that time. And of course, I now have the benefit of hindsight and can summarize what helped me. At the time, it was much more of an emergent process, more of me mucking about, trying to find my own way. And granted, I didn't do it alone. But I want to share these hard won lessons with you all so that hopefully you don't have to struggle as much as I did. So, when I was going through the worst of my burnout, I was the executive director of a small international nonprofit, and I had been in that role for over a decade. So, think about that for a moment, right? And my beloved dad had passed away, and due to a variety of circumstances, both inside of the organization and also due to my own habits, I didn't take the time to really grieve or to acknowledge the immensity of that event. And I just kept working, and I didn't look up again for, I think, another 2 years. So by then, I was super crisp. I mean, burnt out, as fried as I've ever been. And I've shared about this in other live streams and also in some of my writings. So I wanted to, conjure that up in my memory as probably the worst time of burnout that I'd ever felt. And so looking back at how I healed from that, I want to share three main areas that really helped: tools, plan, and community. So, having the right tools. How do you know what those tools are? There's a lot of tools out there, right? Having a personalized plan. Each person is unique in their life circumstances, in their life history. How do you personalize a plan that will work for you? And building community, which so much of us want and have lost that sense of practice or modeling around how we build community. So these three things: tools, plan, and community. I want you to have these in your life as well. And so I'm going to start to break them down a little bit and give you some examples from my own life as a way to illustrate. And then in future live streams, I'm also going to share examples from other people who I've worked with who have helped to transform their own burnout and build emotional resilience. So tools, plan, and community. Now, these sound very general, and that's intentional. Why? Because on one hand, each person's journey out of burnout is so unique to that person. And on the other hand, there are some aspects that are universal that we see time and time again. And so what I'll do when I go through each of these is I'll try to focus on the questions that you need to ask yourself so that you could take these general principles and apply them to your own specific life circumstances. Okay? And I will be doing this over time, breaking these down over time. So the first one is tools. Right? Now, we live in an age where you look throughout social media, you look on the internet, you read books, videos. There's so many tools out there, right? How do you know what tools are really going to work for you in this journey to transform your burnout? And so I wanted to, consider this a little bit. Whenever you want to build something, right, you have to make sure that, number one, you have the right tools. Number two, you have to get those tools. You have to decide what you want to build. And you have to make sure, like, do I have everything that I need in my toolkit? And so I think there are some kind of general things that we all share in terms of what we are trying to build when we're emerging from burnout. And these things include a renewed sense of purpose, right? a sense of meaning, authentic meaning, connection with yourself and with others, and authenticity. So part of being burned out is that you're kind of in a trance, right? You're operating on autopilot. And this trance that you're in is based on external expectations, or perhaps more dangerously, external expectations that you have internalized, right? Which is in some ways more insidious. So there's an initial kind of step that we have to start to take to snap out of this trance. And as I say often, come back to your senses, come back to a sense of your inner compass, your wisest voice inside of you that already knows what you need to do. So when you start to consider all the tools that are out there and getting the right tools in place, here are the kind of questions that you can ask yourself. What helps me get back in touch with my senses? Right? We talk about the 5 senses that we've learned, as kids in school, but actually scientists are saying now there's 12 or 18 different kind of senses. And why am I emphasizing that is because when you come to your senses, when you come back into your body, into the present moment, you start to be able to again access that sense of your own true inner compass. Here's another good question. What tools help me get back in touch with and listening to and trusting my inner voice? Not the voices of others, family, society, other expectations. Because it's one thing to start to get back in touch with that inner voice, with that inner compass. It's another thing to trust it. And we can't really get to that point of recalibrating that compass unless we start to have some tools that help us to get back in touch with that. And this other point here about trusting it, right? So here's a really good way to suss out, tools. Is this tool helping me to trust myself more? Or is it asking me to trust another external authority or another set of external expectations? So that's a really good flag to have, right? If it's helping you to trust your own inner voice, get back in touch with your own senses, get back in your body, then that might be a good one to consider. So I get it, when you're burnt out, sometimes things are so foggy that it's hard to have a clue about, what direction I should move in to get these tools. And so I invite you to think back to the last time that you felt truly alive, joyful, and creative, right? Just right now, even try it. Where were you? What were you doing? Who were you with? And these kinds of questions will help point you in the direction of the tools that you will need to start to snap out of this trance of burnout, snap out of this autopilot that you've been in, right? You've heard me say this before, right? We hear burnout being referred to as mostly physical symptoms, right? Tiredness, exhaustion. And yet these physical manifestations are symptoms of something deeper, right? Burnout is the suppression of emotions. It's the suppression of our authenticity. So that's why I'm asking these questions about the tools and considering the tools that are out there that bring us back to that sense of authenticity, that move in the opposite direction from suppressing that and put us back into that sense of inner compass, that inner voice that already knows what to do. And the cool thing is that there is a huge overlap between the kind of tools that would really help you to emerge from burnout with the kinds of activities and exercises that bring you joy, that make you feel alive, that point you into that direction of wisdom. And so when I think of myself, right, during that time, and I was asking myself those kinds of questions, it led me to identify both tools that I already had, but also ones that I didn't, right? So in my case, by that time I had already been practicing meditation for many years. So that was an important tool for me to sort out which voices or which influences or which expectations were mine and which weren't, which ones I had internalized, etc. Physical activity was an important one for me because of the need to embody my authentic experience. Like others out there, I tend to have a very kind of intellectual, or in the past especially, had a very intellectual approach to solving my problems. And so physical activity, embodiment was important for me. For me, adventure, learning something new was a part of waking me up to those senses again. And also grieving and having rites of passage to mark new seasons in my life, rituals and rites of passage. This can be a very creative and fun way of helping to mark a new season and reawaken that energy. And so these were my tools, because for me specifically, that was going to be the most helpful, right? Because it helped me come back to my senses again, use a different part of my brain. I'd gotten into a rut. That's what happens in burnout, right? And I needed to snap out of that trance to set down some new neural pathways. And so some of you have heard this story before, but I did this challenge called the 52 Hikes Challenge, where, as it sounds like, you try to do some kind of outdoor walk or hike at least approximately once per week for an entire year. And, it doesn't always have to be to the top of a mountain, which I did do. But it could also be just getting out into nature, for example. So that counted that in my account on the hikes. But it incorporated that meditation, the physical activity, learning something new, being in the outdoors, etc. So for you, maybe it's different. Maybe it's art. Maybe it's playing music, what have you. But as it turns out, as I learned later, there's a lot of science behind why these types of tools are helpful. And so when I teach courses and when I coach people one-on-one and in teams, I get much more into the science behind this. But here's a pro tip. So you're probably not going to know all of the tools that you need, since your way of thinking and your past patterns was what got you in this burnout in the first place. So a pro tip is to also to talk to another trusted person or persons who have experienced that same kind of burnout and ask them, hey, what tools did you use, or what tools didn't you even know that you needed at the time, but later on you thought, oh yes, that would be helpful. So just to note that we all have blind spots. And in the case of pulling yourself out of burnout, consulting with a trusted, wise person might be very helpful. So tools. Again, this is very general, and it's really about applying it to your own personal experience, but hopefully some of those questions will help. The second thing that helped me was to have a plan. So we have all these tools, but how do you put them together? And we all know, right, when it comes to habit change, to have a habit change be effective and long-lasting, it's got to be a plan that you can actually implement in your life. It's got to be personal to you. So when considering a plan, we want to start thinking about what are some small incremental steps that we can take, that we can apply in a regular daily discipline. And oh no, discipline, right? That sounds like a little bit of a scary word, but what I'm trying to point to is to find, just an incremental small change that is sustainable, because you want the incremental positive change, and you want to build momentum for that over time, right? So having some kind of habit, small habit that you could implement on a daily basis. And a really helpful thing for me in this has been this notion of habit stacking. I don't know if y'all have heard of that, but habit stacking means you pick something that you're doing every day anyway, and you try to form a link in your mind between the habit that you've already got, brushing your teeth every day or walking your dog or whatever, something you're already doing, and add a teeny new habit and that's moving yourself in the direction of applying those tools. And so habit stacking has been extremely helpful. And why do you need that is because these are deeply seated beliefs and habits that got you to this place of burnout. So we need to lay down some new neural pathways. We need to understand how these past habits and beliefs have been written into our bodies, give ourselves a chance to relax their grip a bit, and then to build new habits on top of that. If we try to build new habits on top of really unclenching on those old ones and how they especially are clenched down in the body, that's going to be pretty difficult. And we have all seen what happens, right? You have all good intentions of starting a new habit, doing these, daily, practicing these daily tools, and then we're not able to sustain them, right? And there's a lot of science behind that as well, the science of habit change, which I'm going to share with you more of in future live streams. So having a plan means taking small steps, getting momentum, stacking habits on top of each other if you can. That's really helpful. So ask yourself, where could I do that, right? And I give you permission that whatever this daily habit or tool that you're going to try to create, it can be joyful. You have permission. It doesn't have to be a slog, right? And in fact, the more that it gives you that juice on a daily basis, the better. And I've talked to you about some of those tools in other live streams and other recordings. So the final one that I want to talk about is community. So it's very, very widely established in the research that the presence of social supports leads to, infinitely better results in habit change than if you try to do this on your own. And so we can start to imagine why that is. One of the first ones that come to mind is this notion of accountability. And of course, there's a lot I can say about that, but I want to make one distinction here. The distinction between calling out and calling in. So when I talk about accountability and in community, I'm not talking about something that's punitive. It's not about punishment, right? It's about someone knowing in your deepest heart of hearts, the person who you want to be, that noblest part of yourself that you're aspiring to be, who knows that about you and is able to, with love and skillfulness and reciprocity, call you back in to that vision of who you want to be, remind you of who you want to be. And so in that case, it's less about, punishment or shame, right? That implies also that inside of community, you need to know that about each one another. And most importantly, especially for BIPOC and for queer folks, there needs to be a sense of safety, people who understand your lived experience, who you don't have to explain everything to. I mean, safety is important for all of us. It doesn't matter who you are, but especially if you're part of a historically marginalized community, that's essential. And the last point here, which is another very juicy topic, is the topic of reciprocity. I want to talk in a future session about some neuroscience findings that show that the opposite of loneliness is not just company, people in your immediate surroundings. The opposite of loneliness is reciprocity, meaning that the way that you feel seen and the way that you feel met and the way that you build intimacy and community is that mutual exchange of vulnerability, trust, and safety. And if you don't have those elements in community, in building community, then you have to take another look and see if that's really the place where you're going to get support for the changes that you want to make in the future, to embody that vision of the life and the person that you want to become. So that's it for the moment. And I'd be really curious to let me know what you think of this. Let me know in the comments, send me a message, and try out a few of these things. Ask yourself a few of these questions and let me know, because I'm always trying to learn about how people are applying some of these insights. And of course, if none of this is helpful, then it's okay. Just disregard it. But I offer it in the spirit of having gone through this, and at that time making an aspiration that if I got any wisdom out of that suffering, that I would try to offer it to whomever I come across who's experiencing the same thing. So here we are through the magic of technology, and you're listening to this right now. So I offer it to you and hope that it's of benefit to you in some way. So thanks so much, everybody, and see you again next time. Send me your questions. I'd like to hear from them. Bye.